Hello, everyone. A warm welcome to today's session of Tech Table Talks, a thought leadership series from Zoho Creator. Our topic for the day is application modernization, the low-code way. Thank you for joining us from different parts of the world. It's a pleasure having all of you here. My name is Tribin, and I'm your host for the day. I recently came across a quote by an American journalist and author named Stuart Brand. It stuck with me. It said, once a new technology rolls over you, if you're not a part of the steamroller, you're a part of the road. And it's so relevant right now, right? How true is that? I'm not going to get into the importance of technology here. That's not the objective with this particular session. We all know it, we have accepted it, and to a large extent, we're trying to figure out how best to leverage it. But even with that knowledge, one big issue that organizations usually struggle with is that technology is almost like a living, breathing organism. It is constantly evolving. It is like a child growing up way too fast and not fitting into clothes bought a month back. Hence, treating it as a one-time investment just does not guarantee success. It doesn't work at all. We have to keep evolving with it. So that is what we are here to discuss about, right? How do we go about evolving our strategy to keep up with the technology changes that is happening? And the key to it is in your legacy modernization strategy. It has to be proactive instead of being a forced afterthought, which we think as something that comes after we set everything in motion. So I have here with me today an esteemed panel of three very experienced technology leaders to help us understand more about application modernization, how can organizations go about it, and what are certain areas that we need to be cautious about while going in on our journey with regards to that. So once again, welcome all of you to the session. Before we get started, let's set some ground rules, right? So you will be on mute throughout the session. Please ask your questions through the questions tab on the left-hand side of your panel. We have a dedicated Q&A towards the end. It will be for about 10-15 minutes. But we do have Shruti and Rudra from my team on the panel to help us out with any immediate question that needs to be answered. This will be an interactive panel discussion. This is not a typical webinar that you will come across. And the slides that you see on the screen is used as placeholders. During the entire conversation, the 1 hour session, we will have a couple of poll questions popping up. It would help us understand and engage with you guys better. And finally, this is a recorded session, so we will be sharing the recording with all of you a couple of days after today. So with that, let's get to know our panelists. So our first guest speaker for the day is Dr. Anil Dairatna. He's a research director for software development at IDC, one of the leading technology analyst firms in the world. His area of specialization is everything technology, especially related to software development, emerging technologies, and how does that impact software development, and overall digital transformation strategy initiatives, etc., across organizations. And legacy modernization is a key area of interest for him for many, many years. Good afternoon, Dr. Anil. It's a pleasure having you here with us on the panel.
Likewise. Thanks.
Great. Before I get to the rest of the panelists, right, I had a quick question for you, Anil. You have been around technology for a long while and probably seen multiple cycles of new technology becoming legacy, and then people going about modernizing it, right? So what is your definition of legacy modernization? How do you perceive it? How do you see it?
Legacy modernization, as I see it, Tribin, is the process of modernizing legacy applications by means of processes such as replatforming, rehosting, refactoring, rewriting, or the use of modern development tools. And in short, the way to think about it is it's the process of bringing modern development tools and infrastructures to legacy applications.
Great. Thank you for that, Dr. Anil. We move on to the next panelist. Joining him on the panel is Rob O'Brien, Senior Technology Manager for ITV Studios. He has years of experience in strategizing and executing organizational technology initiatives. For those of you who are not familiar with ITV, they are a broadcaster in UK and one of the largest commercial production company in Europe. You would have definitely heard shows by them. It includes Downton Abbey, The Voice, etc. So thank you for joining us, Rob. Hope you're doing well.
Yeah, thanks, Ruben. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. I have an extension to the question that I asked Anand, right? How do you define legacy modernization in your organization? And how do you go about it? Can you cite an example for us to help us understand it better?
Yeah, sure. That's a great question, and it's it's obviously very relevant to this call, but it's very relevant to us as a business too at the moment. I think we really think about legacy modernization in two parts at ITV. I think the first part is our kind of war on legacy, which is about ITV making sure that its architecture is on supported infrastructure, that we're using the right infrastructure. We've seen recently the cloud be able to do a lot more than it's been able to do, since ever really. And we also want to make sure that our team, our stuff in data centers and around is on supported tech. Last year we saw Windows 2003, Windows 7 go out of support. We want to make sure that our infrastructure works there, and that's really the core of our legacy modernization. Is about making sure that our systems work on their infrastructure. But beyond that, it's about making sure that our products are okay for regulational change. They're okay for the business. We want to make sure that we've got the right systems located in the right place, be it the cloud or on premise or somewhere else, to do the job they need. So that's one part, the kind of the war on legacy. The second part is digital transformation, which is more about the people, the processes. What does the business need? And we need to make sure that people can get access to the data they need to straight away, that they can do their work as quickly as possible straight away, and things that might have taken days or months in the past can be done instantly by using innovative tools that are coming out there. So really, for me, legacy modernization at ITV is those two bits: war on legacy and digital transformation. In terms of an example, I think you asked for an example. Recently, as part of the pandemic, we found out that our one of our teams was relying on Google Sheets and Excel spreadsheets and Access databases to get data together to bring our kind of our group risk reporting together. We realised that it really shouldn't be taking days and weeks and months to do that, and we need to do it straight away. So we had to look around for a new way of doing it. We settled on Zoho, and we'll talk more about that particular product later. But it was really, we delivered a product that could really do these things and deliver this data in hours rather than days. And that's really what digital transformation, legacy modernization is all about at ITV.
Great to know that. So it's more about speed and getting better at what you're doing, or executing it better using technology, right?
Yeah.
Great. Thank you for that, Rob. Once again, lovely having you here on the panel.
Thank you.
Finally, we have Tejas Gadia, technology evangelist from Zoho. In his role, he connects with customers worldwide and helps them leverage technology in the right way for faster business results. Good morning and welcome to the session, Tejas.
Howdy, Tribun. Thanks for having.
Great. So, Tejas, you bring in a different point of view, that of someone who talks to a lot of customers with their problems and tries to solve it with the products that we have, that Zoho has, right? So, on a scale of 1 to 10, how often, how much of your conversations with your customers include legacy modernization, and what are the typical use cases that you come across regarding them?
Good question. So, I would say it probably comes up 9 out of 10 times. Generally, it really doesn't matter if it's an older organization or a newer organization. I think Rob hit the nail on the head, where he basically said that between even things like Sheets, where if you have a relatively young new company, or even a new process or department within a larger company that's starting out to manage something, very quickly the current process, or I guess the default that people kind of go to, are essentially legacy tools in terms of things that they're already familiar with and comfortable with, that are probably already exist within an organization. And so a lot of, I think, what legacy modernization means to me, and when I talk to customers, is kind of just rethinking what you're doing, giving it an outside of the box approach, and kind of asking critical questions of, are we doing things right? And that's not to say to go against the popular phrase of, if it's not fixed, don't break, or if it's not broken, don't fix it. But I think people should constantly be questioning, what is it that they're doing? How are they achieving their goals? What processes are like? What areas of optimization can happen? And that's a never-ending process, no matter what. It doesn't matter if the tool you bought is a year old, or 10 years old, or 20 years old. Those same questions can be asked, and you should always be being looking for ways to improving your organizational processes.
Great. Thanks for that, Tejas. And finally, you have me. Like I mentioned, I'm Tribin. I handle the role of a customer experience manager for Zoho Creator, one of our low-code application development platform. In this panel, my role is that of a curious learner. I'm trying to understand more about legacy modernization from our panelists, why we should go about it, and how should we go about it. So that's my role in this panel. Thank you, folks. So before we get into the meat of the discussion, let's have a quick poll. Like I mentioned earlier, this would help us understand your profile better and drive the conversation likewise. So the question will pop up on your screen right now. I would request everyone to just quickly vote on it. So the first question is, what organizational function are you from, IT or non-IT? Basic logic is that irrespective of which function you're from, a legacy system, a slow system would slow down your functionality, right? The way you perform your duty. So just to understand that, to see what sort of audience we have here. All right, we'll just give it a couple of more seconds. Cool. So we have a 70-30 split here. We have about 70% of IT folks in the team and about 30% of non-IT folks. So that's great to know. There's one more question that I would quickly want to pop up. Just 1 second. Yeah. So it would be on your screen right now. This is an extension to it, right? So do you face frequent challenges in your organization due to a legacy ecosystem? So we will give it another 10 seconds before we get into the meat of the discussion. All right. So it's almost 50-50 right now. So probably another couple of seconds and then we can, it's actually about 50-50. So that's again good to know. So half of the population over here is here to try and understand why this is relevant, and the other half probably has already registered the issue and trying to figure out what is the solution around it. So that's a good mix to have. So let me get to the discussion, right? So no matter how much I want to avoid talking about the pandemic, because all of us have been doing that for about 6-7 months right now, right? But the basic fact is that we are at a time when there is a pre-COVID and a post-COVID situation. And there is a very, very huge gap, huge separation between the two times. So we will start from there and we'll quickly move on to the rest of the things on how it has impacted organizations. So Rob, since you are from an industry which is very peculiar, and not peculiar per se, but then a very interesting industry, and technology forms a lot of things that you do, like you mentioned earlier. I want to open up with a question to you on how has it actually impacted you? You did touch upon in your intro, but then if you could just dig deeper into it, and how are you going about it? How are you coping with it?
A peculiar industry, Trivin. I like that. I like that. Yeah, you're absolutely right. You know, technology is really at our heart of what we do and what the business outcomes are. We had the same kind of impact that lots of other businesses felt around, you know, the majority of our workforce, 5,000 people, having to work from home almost overnight. The government putting us into a national lockdown, then us all having to move to a work from home environment overnight. And obviously we had loads of effort and trials and tribulations to make sure that things like our VPNs, our remote tools, our cloud products were up to that task. Because that was a huge impact, and that was almost the most important thing that we did first. I mean, for me, in my part of the business, I'm actually in the program making side of the business. So we had to suddenly come up with ways of making TV shows away from the office. And we've been traditionally told that, you know, making television shows relies on-premise infrastructure, that suddenly we had to move into the cloud or deliver remotely to people's bedrooms or whatever. And you know, it was really hard for us to do. We had to get innovative really quick. We had to test stuff really quick. We had to get it out there really quick. And then we still had the same demands on our buyers and our channel to get those shows. So the show had to be just as good, even though it was in this new format, delivered in this new format. And that was really challenging. What it meant for me from a more kind of strategic point of view was that my kind of roadmap of events that I had planned for the year, which was kind of a bit more of a a slow curve around remote production suddenly ramped up massively straight away overnight. We had to quickly start doing things that we had planned to do in 6, 9, 12, even 24 months time, and that was hugely challenging for us. That was a huge impact of the pandemic to us. Another learning that we realized really quickly is that I suggested earlier that we have loads of kind of spreadsheets and Excel databases and databases of data. Well, we learned because of the pandemic what we needed straight away. So suddenly people were working at home. They're working in this kind of emergency kind of way of working to get the job done. We learned from that what was important and what wasn't. And we can start saying stuff that's important, we need to start working on quickly. And we can start building a new roadmap around business priorities and data priorities, rather than just going through the motions of technology change. So for us at ITV, I mean, the impact of the pandemic has been deep. We certainly felt a lot of pain from it. We've learned a lot of lessons, and a lot of lessons that we can use, I think, in the future. And I think what it means for me next is, my roadmap has completely transformed. I think next year will be very different to what it might have been had we not had a pandemic this year.
Sure, got it. And it's very interesting, right? How you leverage technology because you are at a precipice and you're forced to change. So that's very interesting to know, Rob. Anil, you are someone who would have spoken to a lot of organizations before the pandemic and after the pandemic, right? How has the conversation changed, and how do you see that evolving because of what is happening around us?
So that's a great question, Tribin. The question of how the pandemic has influenced conversations and reflection on legacy application modernization. The first thing I would say is, it seems to me, based on conversations with customers and surveys that we've done, that legacy application modernization is something that has been well underway before the pandemic and certainly underway for several years. So, for example, just to introduce a couple of data points, 52% of applications within application portfolios are classified as legacy, according to developers. So slightly more than half, and that's a really stunning percentage. And it's illustrative of the rate of change of innovation and the rate of change of technology, particularly over the last 10 years, and the way in which many applications have become obsolete, and if not obsolete, rendered or thought of as legacy as a result. That having been said, another finding that I can share is that roughly 2/3 of enterprises have already modernized more than half of their application portfolio. So this means that enterprises have been making strong investments in legacy application modernization for a while, and certainly pre-pandemic. That having been said, modernization is an incremental process and tends to be a phased project or process that occurs in stages over the course of several years. Now, regarding your question about how it's changed subsequent to the pandemic, the answer would be that the urgency to modernize has intensified tremendously. And I think Rob has been alluding to that. So organizations understand the importance of modernizing as a result of being forced to develop ad hoc digital transformation initiatives because of the pandemic. And the flip side of this is that in their haste to develop digital solutions because of the pandemic, organizations are acquiring additional technical debt. And the reason for this is digital solutions that enable e-commerce or work from home may well need to be re-architected more thoughtfully once the pandemic is over, which means that the pandemic has ushered in a new set of applications that need to be modernized because they were built so quickly.
Got it. So, Anil, you use the term technical debt. For those of us here who are uninitiated to that, can you just explain that so that it becomes easier for us to understand?
Yes. So technical debt refers to code or digital solutions that really needs to be modernized because because of the operational strain that it introduces to IT teams, either in terms of staffing or just the infrastructure on which it runs.
Got it. Got it. Got it. All right. All right. Thanks for that, Anand. So they're just coming to you, right? A lot of people, due to the pandemic, would have a lot of your customers would have gotten a bit anxious and reached out to you with their problem. So from when you are talking to them, what has been your focus and what is the advice that you have given out the most?
I would say that for the most part, probably after the pandemics started, I've definitely spoken with more businesses on the smaller end of the spectrum, small medium businesses, just because their impact I feel like was a lot harder and a lot more personal. So for them, I would say maximizing value was extremely important. And so, I mean, we're all kind of aware you shift working from home, you have a bunch of processes in place that um, that weren't really digital ready, and maybe required on something that you did in person or maybe even on paper or in the office. And now you needed some way to accomplish those processes in a distributed manner. And so, specifically for smaller organizations, you're not on the buying spree. There's a lot of software options that can work and solve those problems, but you also don't have the cash flow to go and invest new money you're trying to save and plan for what's obviously been a very long time now, even longer than people probably expected way back when. And so the conversation kind of shifted over time, probably around the summer when people realized this isn't really going away in a month or two or three max. This is kind of a longer term thing. And so people really need to figure out not just a solution that works for them, but a solution that can scale with their business, and more importantly, provides a good, essentially a bang for buck, because value becomes extremely important in this sense. You can find a lot of highly specialized software or niche software that does something, but it kind of came to a point where building something on a more, I would say, malleable or scalable platform became a better investment, because you're able to do a lot more with one thing rather than buying 10 different things to solve 10 different problems. You can just buy one thing and solve a lot of problems with it. So especially for small organizations, I think value ended up being probably the direction most conversations ended up going with. For larger companies, I think the conversation was a little bit different. It was probably a little bit more around governance and controls, and trying to maintain kind of order with people kind of being out and about, and making sure that IT has a good control of everything that's in deployment and in production within the organization, and employee facing applications. And so that was more, I would say, administrative on the larger organization side, and then value oriented on the smaller organization side, to sum it up.
Got it. Thank you for that, Tejas. So, what all of you have spoken, I see two things emerging. One, legacy modernization was on the plate for a lot of folks, but then it has accelerated since the pandemic. And two, those who were a bit behind in terms of going about legacy modernization are looking for a short-term fix while working on the long-term plan, which they will take up once things settle down in the timeline. So thank you for that. So that takes me to the next aspect of it, right? So the relationship between digital transformation and legacy modernization. Now, typically, your legacy modernization strategy should be a part of your digital transformation. Anil, that is the case, right? Or do you see a difference in approach to digital transformation versus legacy modernization in your exposure to your customers?
So in general, I see organizations performing legacy application modernization as part of their digital transformation initiatives, particularly if the modernization work involves refactoring or rewriting applications. The one area where I sometimes see a disconnect between the two is in organizations that are modernizing primarily by means of rehosting or replatforming. So in other words, organizations that are thinking about modernization in the context of cloud migration. And sometimes in such scenarios, there's more of a disconnect between between legacy application modernization and digital transformation, then is optimal, it seems to me.
Got it. Okay, understood. So, Rob, to take that forward from an ITV point of view, right? How do you approach these two, and has it changed slightly, or how has it evolved for you?
Yeah, well, I think we do see them as separate things. I think we do look at digital transformation and legacy modernization as different things. I think for me, legacy modernization is about the platform and the technology and the product itself. And digital transformation is about people and processes and outcomes and what the business wants to get to it. And I think that in IT, the way we've approached this is that we've got a, and I alluded to this earlier, we've got this war on legacy program. And this is really about making sure that our platform is fit for purpose, that it's the right platform, that it's supported, that it's using the right technology, be it cloud or something different, software as a service or on-premise or whatever, and making sure that we're regulatory performing. But those things are different to what a user expects from the product. And I think what the user expects and what the business needs is about our digital transformation. And that's really about people. What do they need to do today? And is there a better way of doing it? Is there a different system or workflow that we could use to get the outcomes that we need? And that's what digital transformation is about for us. So there are those two things. I'm not saying they're always separate things. They blend together all the time. Using different technology is important, but that's how we kind of separate them. And I think for us, again, what we've learned actually is, the digital transformation program is about the way people work, and that's lend on the legacy modernization. And what we've learned in the pandemic is that getting the legacy modernization right, choosing the right platform for your product, can determine multiple outcomes for the digital transformation program.
Got it. So it's more of an enabler versus the larger picture, right?
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. Thanks for that, Rob. Tejas, you would have seen organizations going both ways, right? In the sense that for someone, it might be very tightly coupled, and for others, it might be a bit siloed. So, what are the advantages that you see, and which approach works the best?
I'm not sure there is a one size fits all or a one approach that works for everybody. I think Rob said it perfectly. Every organization has their own approaches to it, and really, I guess going back to kind of what I said at the very beginning, when your key stakeholders in the organization are critical of your current, let's say software landscape or even just processes as a whole, you'll be able to identify where kind of some holes are and kind of reimagine what could probably basically be a more optimal or efficient or productive way of doing things in a secure and digital manner as well. And so I'm not sure there is a one answer that works for everybody. I think looking at both options and seeing the way your organizational culture works, what your I guess the health of your business is an impact of it as well. So I think there's a lot of variables at play. So you can't really give a straight answer on it. But I think everyone should definitely look at both ways and see what works best for them.
Right. So basically, sit down, go back to the drawing board, and try and figure out what fits into your setup, the way you are structured, and then go about it. Right.
Exactly.
Great. Okay. All right. So that brings us back to the drawing board where we put down the strategies and how do we go about building that strategy. So Anand, question for you is there would be different roads to the same destination. What are the different approaches to legacy modernization? I know you spoke about it, like replatforming and all those things, right? Can you just dwell a bit more into it to elaborate on it?
Sure, Tribhuvan. Absolutely. So it seems to me that there are 5 different modalities of legacy application modernization. I'm not sure they lead to the same destination per se. I think they lead to different destinations, but there are 5 different modernization paths. The first of which is something that we've discussed, which is rehosting. of applications, and that refers to the lift and shift of applications from one platform to the cloud, right? With little to no architectural changes to the application itself. So that would be rehosting. And then second is replatforming applications, and that refers to the migration of applications from an on-premises environment to the cloud with some minor changes that leverage some of the cloud platforms functionality, such as auto scaling and high availability. So the difference between replatforming and rehosting is that replatforming performs some kind of optimization and minor functionality change to the application that enables it to be optimally deployed on the cloud. Third, refactoring refers to the re-architecting of applications to optimize their functionality for the cloud and just more generally. And so one common example of refactoring involves transforming monolithic applications into microservices architectures. And you can do this. I mean, just to be clear, one can refactor applications both on premises and in the cloud. It doesn't have to be done in the cloud. The fourth modality of modernization is bringing modern development tools to legacy applications. And this involves the use of, for example, cloud-based IDEs and DevOps tooling to enhance legacy applications without refactoring them in their entirety. It's something that we see commonly in the mainframe space, where there's a reluctance on the part of customers to disrupt code bases that are working well, but there is a need to build in some new functionality, and so one way to do that is to bring modern development tools to applications, and then finally rewriting applications from scratch, and that's typically done when there's a need for a lot of new functionality.
Got it. So 5 different ways to go about it, and like you mentioned, the end objective or end goal with each of the approach would be slightly different from each other, but overall the objective would be to transform the way you are doing business by leveraging technology that works for you, right?
Right.
In fact, Tejas, the whole process of legacy modernization is perceived as something which is extremely time-consuming, effort-consuming, etc. So, how do you go about speeding up the execution of modernization? What are the ways of going about that?
I mean, I think speed is important, but I mean, I would say it's definitely not a sprint; it's a marathon. And so, I mean, it's a constantly evolving thing that should constantly be looked at. So, as long as you set generally goals, I would say start small, smaller processes, smaller projects that give you a sense of accomplishment and show that you're making progress will get buy-in from more and more people. Because going back to what I said, you have to have a lot of stakeholders in the conversation, poking holes at current processes or current solutions that are in place and finding ways for optimizations. And not everybody has the time or the bandwidth or wants to put in the effort to do that kind of extra work. Right off the bat, which it's not easy stuff to basically dissect what you're doing. And so if you start with smaller things, you show some successes here and there, and kind of the scope of these projects will happen. So tackling the biggest problem first, I don't think is always the best way. I think starting small, building some momentum, and then eventually you'll get to bigger problems down the line. So I'm not really sure if speed is the answer. I think it's more track record of success will build a lot of organizational momentum, and I think it'll build some values and I guess values is the best word, of people in the organization and buy-in from them that this is a successful thing and not just some buzzword for management that sounds good, because ultimately you do need people on the ground beyond just decision makers input in order to being successful in these kind of transitions.
Got it. Rob, you were about to say something, right? So would you want to add on something to that?
No, I mean, I just adding on to Tejas is absolutely right. I think doing something and then proving it's worth before you do something else is really important. I think whenever you're doing any kind of modernization program. You have to look at your business priorities, your overall business strategy. An example of that at ITV might be our environmental goals to be carbon neutral by 2030. You have to start with that. You have to start with the outcome that you want to get to, and find a mix in the middle that delivers the right approach to getting your systems modernized. Absolutely, I think there is no perfect way of doing it. You can't always just re-architect, you can't always just rebuild. You have to find the right solution for the product you're trying to move on.
Got it. Thanks for that, Rob. So let's get to the execution part now that the strategies are made, right? And this is where I want to introduce low code as a piece that can enable legacy modernization. Now, Anil did mention different ways of going about it, but Anil, my question to you would be: do you see low code, what role do you see low code application development playing in this whole different aspects of legacy modernization, and what are the advantages that low code application platforms like Zoho Creator bring to the table?
So the advantages of low code, Tribun, are increased or accelerated developer velocity and code reusability, which is related to developer velocity, which is enabled primarily by component reusability. Another advantage of low code is visually driven development and a more intuitive development experience. And then finally, a democratization of the developer experience so that it's possible, or it becomes possible, for someone who isn't necessarily an expert in coding and scripting to participate in application development. But in the context of legacy modernization, I would say that low code has the potential to be extremely relevant because it allows business stakeholders more direct access to the solution that's being generated, and there's a possibility, or there's the potential for more rapid feedback loops between business stakeholders who are sponsoring application development and the developers themselves, and this means that the likelihood of business stakeholder expectations being met increases.
Got it. Thanks for that, Anil. Tejas, let's talk about Zoho Creator in itself, right? How are organizations leveraging Zoho Creator for legacy modernization? Is it on the same lines of what Anil mentioned? Do you see it being explored differently? What are your thoughts around that?
No, I think it goes off of what Arnaud said, pretty spot on as well. I mean, being able, I guess, kind of again going back to what I said before, that value maximization concept helps a lot with creator or low code platforms in general, where you're able to build a lot of things more or less essentially for a fixed price on a per user model. So I mean, you can't consider your cost factor in these kind of things as well. And ultimately, it's one of those things that once you kind of get the ball rolling with a few small successes, like I answered on the last question, your confidence, your skill in the platform and the tool increase over time, which only increases your productivity later on as well. And so in terms of how they're using Creator, it generally starts with smaller problems and maybe team level or departmental level solutions for problems that they have or modernization efforts, and then it'll grow into enterprise-wide, organization-wide deployments that are larger in scale. But generally, you kind of need some proof of success, and that is easier to have at a smaller level. So generally, it's kind of like a snowball effect, I would say, is probably the best way to word it.
Got it. So it grows as and when we progress on the plan. Got it. Thanks, Tejas, for that. Coming to, you have been using Creator for a few years now. Can you elaborate your journey from how you went with Zoho Creator to what are you using it for, and what do you plan to do with the platform in future?
Yeah, sure. And actually, before I start, a lot of the stuff Tejas just said, it really rings true with the ITV story. So we started using Creator a couple of years ago for our development business. So ITV is an international business. We've got offices all around the world, like America, the Nordics, Australia, everywhere. And they're all developing shows. And what I mean by developing shows is they're coming up with ideas for TV shows that could be commissioned and made into real things, real TV shows to go on different channels around the world. We found that these teams operating in different territory were using all sorts of different tools to keep track of their development. There was no kind of common data set. There was no way of gathering data from different people to work out what was being developed where. And often teams would kind of work between themselves in different territories to try and hand over different development ideas to different teams to see if they would work in different territories. Now, it didn't really work. We had data on spreadsheets, on Google Sheets. We had data in Access database, in people's heads, in emails, data all over the place. So the central development team were unable to really understand what the true story was at ITV. How many ideas did we have? What was the real value of our America office or our Nordics office or our London office? What were they really coming up with? We didn't have that. So we brought the data together in Creator, and we chose Creator because actually we had a really great SI in A to Z who helped us. But we chose them because of the low-code part of the system. We knew that we needed a bespoke product for ITV. We knew from a supplier assessment that we couldn't take off the shelf the development product, that we couldn't take off the shelf a developed product that would work for ITV. We knew we were going to have to do some level of development, but we don't have loads of developers, and we don't have loads of money to pay for any developers to develop just this service. So we looked around, we learned a bit about low code. We felt comfortable that we could learn the ropes with building our own thing in Creator. We learned a lot on our supplier, A to Z. They were great with helping us build the system. And within a couple of months, we had a development system. Internally we called it Create. And it was great. For the first time, there was a common picture of what we were developing around the whole of ITV. Our managers had a dashboard. They could see what was being developed in a graphical interface in one click. That was actually an integration to analytics into Creator. But everyone was excited about it. And actually, we found that the users weren't disengaged because they'd lost their favorite spreadsheet or whatever that they wanted to. Actually, they've been crying out for a common way of doing this and seeing the same data around the world. And that was kind of the start of our story. We did that. We went through version 1, then we modernized it into version 2, and now we're looking at version 3 there too. And these are just mild adjustments, but generally we started with that piece and we delivered real success really quickly. Then people in the business picked up about this product called Create that lived on the Zoho platform, and other people wanted to. So at the start of the pandemic, I talked about ITV not having its data necessarily in the right place that was easily accessible. Our group risk team and our production team found that when the pandemic started, they wanted a true picture of what ITV Studios as a production making business looked like. We didn't have that. Again, it was in spreadsheets in people's heads and email. We didn't have that, but it was assumed by our leaders. It was just in a dashboard. Hey, why can't we just look at the dashboard? They said. We didn't have it. We never built it. Perhaps it was on the list, but we'd never done it. So we needed it quick. Actually, our target was to get a dashboard that could give this information and give this data back to those people who needed to in 7 weeks. And because of low code, because of the Zoho ease of use and the general building Creator, we were able to do that. And we were able to start at the beginning actually confident that at the end of the 7 weeks, we'd have something to give back to the guys. And we did. And now ITV's got, it's got its development system. It knows what ideas it's got and what could become production. And then it's got another system that shows it what's in production, what's in pre-production, what's in production, what's in post-production, what's on air tomorrow. That's all in Creator. What next in the ITV story? Well, if you've got what's coming through, why not start looking at your complete finished tape sales? Actually, what is ITV selling around the world and stuff as well? Why not give the business a view of the whole ITV picture? What's being developed, what's in studio, what's on air, what's doing well, what isn't, in one place. That's the future, and that's what we're looking at in the next few months. But the ITV story, is a really positive one for Creator. It's actually really important to our business. But the idea that we were able to start from scratch, get systems going quickly, make changes because of the ease of use of the low-code infrastructure in the background, have all led to a great story for ITV for using Creator. So I'm pleased to say it's a positive journey that we've been on.
Thank you very much for that, Rob. It's always we feel extremely happy when we hear stories like this, where there has been a tangible difference in with the product that we are taking to the market, right? So it's always great to hear that, and thank you very much for those kind words. Let me move on to the next part, which is the fact is that no strategy is a perfect strategy. There will be pros and cons, like we have discussed throughout this discussion. So, Anil, one question to you around this. Let's say you're adopting low code for legacy modernization, or using that as a part in your entire strategy. What are the caution points to be kept in mind before you start the journey, and how do you go about it? What are the key things you need to be wary of while you are going ahead with that?
So I think two caution points come to mind. The first of which concerns debugging and visibility into application performance, right? Which in the case of low code is often more difficult to understand than in the case of applications that have been built or developed through custom coding and scripting. That having been said, many low code vendors do have rich tools for understanding application performance and monitoring and management. And so I think that's one consideration. The second is limitations related to the development of new functionality. And this is something that is often the case with low-code development platforms, because they sometimes have circumscribed or limited development capabilities. In other words, if you wanted to develop a custom analytic algorithm or predictive model, you may not be able to develop every algorithm under the sun using low-code development tools. That having been said, insofar as you're using a genuinely low-code platform, developers should have the freedom to supplement existing functionality within the platform with some, with a modicum of custom coding and scripting, and so that's something that organizations can work around.
Got it. Thank you for that, Anil. We are right on time. The next part of this discussion is Q&A. Thank you, folks. Whatever we just discussed right now, it's extremely enlightening. I am sure it would have given a lot of ideas around how to go about the whole process of legacy modernization. Let's get into the Q&A. We have a few questions already, so I'll project it on the screen. I think the first question, Bhupati has asked, usual question by legacy clients. One, completely rewrite it using latest technology, which is time consuming and costly, or write a quick wrapper around legacy and use a bot to get data integrations and proceed from now. So this is related to the different ways of going about it that you mentioned. So Anil, would you want to take that? What would you suggest to Bhupati in this particular case? Yeah,
so Tribhuvan, remind me what the actual question is, because I see those two scenarios. What's the actual question?
Okay, what do you recommend? What is the ideal way to go about it?
Okay.
From the two scenarios that was mentioned.
I certainly don't recommend putting some kind of wrapper around a legacy application and creating a shortcut, because that is the definition, or that's the way in which technical debt gets created. And what will happen is you will be able to make a short-term fix to an immediate problem, but the amount of time and effort that you'll have to invest down the road is going to be very, very significant. That having been said, I don't think that it's necessary to rewrite applications from scratch. The ideal thing might be to refactor the application and preserve, for example, 80% of the original code, and rewrite 20% of the code and transform it into a microservices architecture. And that's something that's very, very powerful, because it increases developer agility and velocity, because development teams can work in parallel on an application, and it's something that is... Got it. Thanks, Arnold. I hope that answers. Yeah. Thank you for that.
Another question that we have, Rob, this is for you. How long did it take to see significant results after implementing the low-code solution in your organization? I know it was done on a project-to-project basis, but if you had to put a timeline around it, what would be the timeline that you would say it worked?
Well, I'd say actually, I think if I understand the question right, we were if we come back to our ITV Studios production product. So this is where we could see what was in studio, what was in pre-production, what was in production, what was in post-production. We were asked to deliver that this year during the lockdown. So we had a system up and running within 7 weeks. We had people trained on the system within 2 months of that date and using the system, and then it really started delivering results for us. People were able to start using the product in anger and have it as their day-to-day system. So I would say, really because of low code, we're talking 16 weeks to start seeing results in the system.
Great, that's roughly about three and a half to 4 months. Thanks for that, Rob. Tejas, we have a question on Creator. Kevin asks, can Creator link to data in existing legacy systems, and how does that work out?
Yeah, most definitely. So we can connect to on-premise or legacy systems as well. We have some connectors that we can utilize, or APIs. So connections and integrations are generally not an issue with almost any third-party service. Some are a little bit more straightforward than others, but there's a lot of pre-built ones for most popular legacy systems. So it's never really a barrier in terms of connecting with them. Connecting, I would say, is the first step, though. I would caution that a lot of times people will connect to legacy systems, but once you bring it over into a new platform, then you really got to be asking yourself questions about syncing and data manipulation and things like that, where if you're bringing information from a legacy system into, let's say, a Creator application and using that to manage some process, or people are accessing it and making changes to it, you got to make sure you're sending it back, keeping it all up to date. And the other systems that are connecting to the legacy system is also getting up-to-date information that's been modified from Creator or another low-code solution. So there's a lot more that goes into just the standard answer that most people probably give you of, yes, we can connect to it. Integrations can be tricky, so you got to ask a lot of questions about how the data is kind of being processed and transitioned and transferred between systems, and it can get messy very quickly. But short answer, yes. Long answer, be sure to consider all the, I would say, adjunct consequences or benefits of that integration.
Great, thanks for that, Tejas. Anil, one final question to you. You did mention about microservices, and this is around that. The question is, do you think that applications built out of independently deployable modules are the future of flexible solution development? What role do you see that playing?
So I certainly think that applications built on separate modules that connect to one another, and perhaps even some monolithic code base via APIs represent part of the future of contemporary application development. They enhance developer agility because teams can work on multiple microservices in parallel, and this is great. And architecturally, they simplify the architecture of applications and enable new generations of teams who are coming in to more effectively and more quickly understand applications that they're working on. And this is another conversation that I think is relevant to legacy application modernization, because we want to make sure that the modern application that we produce itself doesn't turn out to be a legacy application in 10 years. And so I think there's a prominent place for such application architectures in application development.
Got it. Thanks for that, Anil. So idea is to approach with a strategy of implementing a solution that is not obsolete very quickly. So work on that and try and plan it out for that. Thank you very much for that. So we are almost done with the session. Closing remarks. There are a few questions which we have not responded to yet because of lack of time. We will come back to you over email with responses to those questions in a couple of days. Thank you for sending in your questions. Now, time for a quick poll, which I will launch right now. 30 seconds, and then we go into the closing space. Would you want to avail a free consulting session worth about $500 with our solution expert on legacy modernization in your organization? Based on your response, we will have somebody reach out to you, understand what is the concern that is going around, what is the problem, what is the challenge you are facing, and then try and figure out a custom solution, a custom POC for you. So I'll give it another 10-15 seconds for everyone to respond before going to the closing remarks. All right, another couple of seconds, and we're almost done with it. Going into the closing remarks, it's fairly straightforward. 30 seconds. All of you, a question to all of you. How do you? What is the future of legacy modernization that you're predicting? I've given a timeline, but it's not necessary to stick to it. Anil, if you can start with you, what do you see? Where do you see this going?
So I see this going in terms of increased adoption of microservices and containers, and I see tremendous investment made on the part of enterprises in the next 5 to 7 years with respect to legacy application modernization.
Great. Thanks for that. Tejas, your take?
Hey, Tribun, can you hear me?
Yes, we lost you for a second.
Oh, I lost you for a second. I guess a little bit more than a second. It's been about a minute or so. I was trying to reconnect, but I just came back in. Well, what was the question? Sorry.
The question is, closing remarks. Where do you see legacy modernization going over the next 5 years? How do you see it shaping up?
I mean, I think now is the time. People should have already been kind of looking into these kind of things, but by 2025, I don't think we're going to be in too much of a different spot. I think we'll still have a lot of legacy systems in place that people will be looking to work on. But I think one of the favorite things I heard today was what Arnold was saying, that making sure that, you know, when you implement a system, you want to make sure that it doesn't become a legacy system. And the way you can do that is not just a set it and forget it mentality. You kind of want to make sure that you're constantly in the process of evolution. So I think hopefully in the next 5 years, we'll have people being able to invest in these kind of things and put more effort in that area in order to kind of be a little bit more agile and nimble going forward.
Great, thanks for that, Tejas. Rob, your take?
Yeah, very quickly. It will never end. In 2025, I can guarantee there will be another legacy modernization program. My prediction: more cloud, more software as a service.
Great. That's a great line to close this conversation. Thank you for your time, everyone. If you have any queries related to low code or legacy modernization or anything that we spoke about today, please drop in a mail to mike.k@zoho.com. Like I said earlier, this is a recorded session, so we will be sharing the recording with you very soon. Once again, thank you, Dr. Anil, Rob, and Tejas for taking your time out, for spending it in explaining all the questions around legacy modernization. It was a fascinating discussion for me. Thank you very much, and stay safe, everyone. Cheers. Bye-bye.